Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the special council meeting of, what's the date? March the 4th. Appreciate council attending today. And I would assume there are no other late items for their special meeting. Okay, so could I ask for approval of the agenda, please? Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Holmes, all in favor? Great, I see a hand up. Thank you, Councillor Barkwell, I think it is. I'm not really sure. Can't really see. Were you going to open this? Thank you, Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I asked the corporate officer to set up this very short information update sort of meeting today. And the purpose of the meeting is to provide council with this verbal update and a short PowerPoint presentation, which will be delivered by our Director of Works and Infrastructure. And that is just to give council a final snapshot of where we're at before we begin the process out to the public and in terms of the approval for borrowing. So council will recall there are two components of the project. There's the road rebuilding and water twinning. In addition, but peripheral to the main project, is what we term the upstream tie-ins that'll be necessary to actually bring the raw water to the site that can go down that second line. Council had also approved budget for some contracted engineering advice to evaluate those upstream tie-ins. Now, we just received the initial advice from the engineer, who's indicated that the tie-in work is just going to be a bit more involved due to some infrastructure complexities. So this doesn't have any tangible bearing on the overall objectives and outcomes of the project. However, it does mean the raw water to the separated line will take more time. And initially, we had kind of hoped for maybe even 2023 for that raw water benefit, but it's going to take longer, and we're going to have those upstream components completed to be able to do that. To be clear, the pipes will still be in the ground and separated in the near term with that road upgrade, but the raw water will take more time. So in my view, that doesn't change the main thrust or value of the project, but I wanted to make sure we have time with council and a clear line of sight before we go out to the public. And of course, it also doesn't change our borrowing ceiling either with the public or that borrowing bylaw in any way. But we just wanted to make sure council has that clear line of sight with a quick meeting today. And then tomorrow, I think is our deadline for the newspapers. And then we run a couple today. Today's the deadline, rather. Yeah, today's Friday, right on. Today's the deadline for newspapers this afternoon, and then we'll go out for a couple newspaper runs on notice. So maybe I'll turn it over to you, Joe, to help us through this.
Actually, sorry, Joe, before you get started, I just have a couple of questions on what you just said. When you say on notice, are you talking about the AAP? Okay, and my second question is, does the AAP make it clear that this will mean a 2% tax increase? Good, thank you. Just wanted to make that crystal clear.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I think we even have some of the exact language maybe in the presentation today for council. So.
Okay, great. Sorry, Joe, thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just before I get started, I don't know if everybody knows Michael Owen. He's with Associated Engineering. He's the engineer on this project that's helped put some of this information together. So he's here for if we do have any technical questions, which I don't anticipate. See if we can make this work. It says it's on.
We did receive the slides. Okay, great. We did receive them this morning.
Perfect. Thanks. Just before we get into too much of the detail, I just wanted to give a really brief background because we haven't looked at this in a few months. So this is the overall project from Harris Road through to Hilborn Street. And as council will remember, we kind of split this into two sections, two different final construction methods. The first one is from Harris Road to Gartrell Road, so the north stretch. This stretch will include two new pipes, one for irrigation, one for domestic. full repaving of the entire project, as well as a 3-meter wide walking path. The next stretch, the south portion from Gartrell Road to Holborn, is strictly pulverizing the existing asphalt and then repaving in that area. There is some additional work that we have to do because there are pipes in the ground. They're very old pipes, but there's a few services that'll have to be connected to the appropriate pipes at that time. So that's a little bit more of the civil works, but for the most part, this part is just the a paving of the road. And there is no pathway along this stretch. Okay, so this drawing is sort of an overview of the area of town that was going to be system separated at the conclusion of this project. So all the parcels that are identified in green here are the scope of work that once we have system separation put in place, this area will be fully system separated. As Council will recall, there were, as Graham alluded to as well, about 5 upstream areas that need upgrade in order to actually provide untreated water to this area right here. So that was a part of the project that Council endorsed, and back in November, we were going ahead with just the design of that component. So the rest of the project had already been designed, everything along Giants Head Road, but the upstream projects had just been identified. What my predecessor thought were the projects needed to system separate this area. So we went ahead and started that design, and working with Associate Engineering. We did that design for those upstream upgrades, and it was determined that there were several more upgrades required outside of the Giants Head Road project area to allow for immediate system separation of this project. So on this graph, you'll see a red area of town. So in doing some of these upgrades, the upstream upgrades, we noticed that it would have some effects on the area in red down below. So there are a few more upgrades that will be required in order to provide untreated water to our stretch of Giants Head Road right now. And that would be well above the $2 million that we have budgeted for the upstream projects for this year. So what does that mean for the project? Well, as Graham alluded to, the project can still go ahead identical to the way it was before. Basically the tender is going to be the exact same. All of the works will be installed, so the water mains will be installed. The tie-ins will happen to the appropriate water mains, treated and untreated. Just at the end of the project, at that time, it'll be treated water that runs through all the pipes. At a future date, once we do a couple of other upgrades around town, it'll just be essentially flicking a switch once those upgrades are done, and untreated water will go into the appropriate pipe. So the infrastructure is there, the paving will be there, the path will be there. It'll just be treated water for the short term. The goal still in the long term is obviously to have untreated water in the irrigation main. So as part of the AAP, the alternate approval process, we have to submit certain documentation to the province. And we did. We submitted all of our council reports, the bylaws, everything that was required for that. And outlined in that, and as council saw at the November 22nd meeting, part of this project, part of the benefit of this project is will likely reduce the demand on the water treatment plant by about 5 megaliters per day, which is significant considering the capacity is in the 75 megaliters per day area or limit. That's still the case for this project. It will still result in that 5 megaliters per day reduction, but not at this time, not until some of those upstream projects have been completed. So if this project is completed in November of this year, it'll still be treated water, so that won't have the benefit to the water treatment plant now, but in the future it will. With regard to what we've told to the province, we actually did say to the province, and this comes straight out of our November 22nd council report, that the Giants Head Road project can proceed with construction, including system separation. However, the infrastructure for system separation within Giants Head Road would utilize treated water until such time that the upstream works are completed. And so that's still the case. The upstream works won't be completed at this time, but we can still put the infrastructure in, and this is still within the scope of what we sent to the province to approve our alternative approval process. We confirmed that as late as yesterday at 4:30. We went through everything with the province, and they said everything's good to go. There's no issues with the changes that we have. That said, it's very important that we communicate this to the public. We're transparent and accurate in what we said. So this is just a small excerpt of the notification that's going to go in the newspaper. We're sending it today, but it'll be in next week's newspaper. And the very top of the excerpt or of the advertisement, it outlines the exact project or high level what the project will entail. And the tail end of it says the Giants Head Road Upgrade Project includes the roadway construction, construction of pathway shoulder bike lanes, drainage improvements, water main replacement, and water system separation infrastructure along Giants Head Road, and then the pulverizing and paving of Giants Head Road from Gartrell to Hillborn. We'll also have a link to the website where there will be full information for people to look at that identifies exactly what's happening and what's not happening with this project, so that it's abundantly clear for them when they want to, if they choose to come in and exercise the AAP. And now, just as a summary for council, this is the AAP schedule, and this is nothing has changed with this, but the advertising starts next Thursday, and then there's a subsequent advertisement the following Thursday, and the final date for submitting of the electoral response forms is April 19th. And then the corporate officer will bring the results to council at the April 25th council meeting. If that all goes according to plan, the tender would follow immediately within a couple days of that to go out for tender in the hopes of construction happening in early summer of this year. I don't know if there are any questions from council with regard to this. Oh, Graham has.
If I may, Madam Mayor, so just to sum up, I mean, the project's the same, the borrowing ceiling's the same, the intent is the same, the outcomes are the same. We've always known it would take some more time to get that raw water to those lines because of the upstream project. The only change, which I just wanted to make sure council's aware of, now that we understand those upstream projects are a little more complex, it will take some more time to get that raw water there, but it's still in our plan and still, it's just going to take a bit more time than we had originally anticipated. But that's the piece I wanted to make sure, just for council's awareness in a short meeting today. Thanks for your presentation, Joe.
Great, thank you. And we do have a couple of questions. Councillor Van Elfen and Councillor Holmes, and I have one as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question through to our CEO then. The borrowing ceiling that we're asking for the public to approve will be adequate enough to cover all the costs of the upstream works?
Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you, through the mayor. So the upstream works have been partially designed at this point, but it's not recommended that we go ahead with the construction of those. We need to reevaluate further downstream components before we move ahead with that, because there may be other efficiencies that we see that we may look at alternate approaches to that. So the funding we do have in place is adequate, and it'll actually come in somewhat below that 6.4 million. Thank you. Thanks.
Kendra, could I ask you to take the presentation off of the screen so I can see Councillor Burkle? Thank you. When you're able to, Councillor Trainer, could you please turn your video on? Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, so my question is on funding along the same lines. So of the total project costs, 2 million of that is for the upstream work, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, and that money is still sufficient
So
for the upstream work.
Through the mayor, the upstream work won't be completed at this time, so we won't be using that $2 million for the upstream work. We're going to reevaluate that, and that'll be a future project, just because the upstream works also affect some of the downstream works, and we don't want to. I think there'll be efficiencies in relooking at those upstream works, because there's a significant number of upstream works prior to actually moving ahead with construction of that. So at this time, so for this year, it'll just be the Giants Head Road projects that'll be actually constructed. The other components we'll leave to a later date until we can analyze the full system to ensure we're constructing accordingly.
So to follow up, so that $2 million, which won't be needed right now, will be left in reserves for future, or what?
No, we just won't actually need to borrow that at the end of the day. So at the end of the project, our director of finance will look at, it'll be about 4 million or 4.5 million for the construction of this project. We just won't need to borrow that additional $2 million at this time. So it'll obviously change the amount that the public pays at this time.
So just to follow up again, so at some point in the future, though, we'll need that $2 million to do the upstream work.
Correct, but that $2 million might be a different number, and it might be different works that we actually choose to complete. It might be a different methodology to get the untreated water to that Giant's Head Road project. When we did this review, we found a significant number of other projects that are affected by some of our upstream projects. So that's why at this time, to proceed with the Giant's Head part of the project, we just want to put those other projects on hold and reevaluate that.
Right, okay, thank you.
So my question relates to what Councillor Holmes was just asking as well. How many upstream projects are you seeing at this point?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We identified 5 upstream projects back in November.
Yes.
It turns out that one of those projects wasn't needed, and there was an additional one that was needed within that upstream area.
Okay.
But the concern right now is more the downstream area. So the changes we do upstream of Giant's Head Road, those projects may or may not proceed in the future. It's some of the downstream effects it may have. So things like an additional PRV station or infrastructure like that we may need in the future. So that's a much more detailed analysis that we need to do. And at this point, today, we don't have those numbers because there are a bunch of different ideas on how we can proceed with that. We just want to make sure that we make the most efficient design possible, and we plan out how we're going to be sort of addressing each of the projects. And it's actually ideal that this year we're doing the 10-year road and water master plan because what we'll do is we'll push some of these projects into that so that they're done in a timely manner in an effort to system separate as quickly as we can. Giant's Head Road might not be the first to get system separated when we look at the whole plan, but at least it's essentially pre-ducted so that once we can get the untreated water there, it's just the flick of a switch.
Okay, thank you. And I have a question related to that. I had written down that you're anticipating that the cost for whatever upstream or potentially downstream upgrades need to be done, the amount will be well above the 2 million allocated in 2022, which we understand is part of the borrowing. So when we are able to get the upgrades underway, once the $2 million has been allocated, then we look to our usual budget for the remainder. I just want to make sure that we're not going back to the public again for another approval for borrowing.
Go ahead.
I just thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, so we do have this 10-year road and water master plan that we're working towards, and that is going to set out lots of projects in the broader area and elsewhere in terms of through our regular budgeting processes. And it's not our intent to go back out for additional borrowing requests in any way. But Joe, maybe, or Dave, if you have anything to add to that.
Yes, thank you, through the mayor. The $2 million, sort of once we finish this project, Dave will cut off the project at whatever the price is, 4.3 million or whatever that number turns out to be. That additional $2 million will not be borrowed. And when we move to a subsequent project in next year or years down the road, depending on what the Director of Finance comes up with for how we can fund those projects, There may be an AAP depending on the price point of those, but it would be a much larger project with a different scope than what we have right now. So I'm not sure if Dave can speak to that, but
Well, not knowing what the future costs of any future projects are, yeah, I can't speak to whether or not we'd have to go through another AAP process or anything like that. But what I can tell council is, yeah, in terms of this $2 million of upstream costs, the way the borrowing bylaw is written is that the district is we can borrow up to the $6.4 million. So if we are not required to borrow those funds, or if we're not going to move forward with this $2 million of upstreams, we just won't borrow those monies. So our overall borrowing then will be the 4.4 or whatever the number turns out to be, which of course then will lower the amount that residents would have to pay on that debt. But as Joe was mentioning, in the future, when a plan is put together and the 10-year capital plan and they're looking at all these different projects, at that point in time, council will then need to, through the budgeting process, determine how to move forward with some of those projects. And at that point, we'll know what the costs are, and my role will be to provide council with different funding options, and it'll be council's decision at that point.
So the usual process that we follow.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Okay. I just want to clarify one thing. My understanding is, you know, even though it says up to the 6.4 or whatever it is, yeah, $6.4 million, almost 6.5, that includes the 2 million. My preference would be to borrow all of that now, and just to avoid having to go back to the public in I don't know how many years, but with another AAP for the $2+ million. I would prefer to see the $2 million be borrowed now and invested somewhere, earning interest, and then we'll have that kind of nest egg, I guess, in the reserve to allocate to this project, knowing that it's going to be more than $2 million, but we don't know how much more at this time. To me, that it's a better way to, I think it's more transparent to the public, for one thing, and secondly, at least in my limited experience in the last 7.5 years on council, it's easier to find money either within the budget or within grants to support these extra projects. And if we already have $2 million set aside for that, then we're a little bit ahead of the game. Does that make sense? Are you understanding? I'm not sure, I shouldn't ask if it makes sense. Are you understanding what I'm saying?
Is that a question for me, Madam Mayor?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, no, I completely understand the theory and the logic behind that. We can do whatever council directs us to do. We can borrow the full 6 million. We can borrow only up to what we spend. It's completely up to council in terms of what you would have us do.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go to Councillor Traynor and then Councillor Barkwell. Oh, I see Martin's hand up as well, but I'll go to the councillors first, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Martin.
So I just have a question regarding borrowing. Are we allowed to borrow money like that, the $2 million, and put it in a reserve when we don't have an exact timeline for the project, and we would be paying interest on that as well. So I'm not sure if those two things are allowed, or maybe David can help me with that.
The way the bylaw is written, we are allowed to, because we would be borrowing the money for those works. There's no time specificity within the bylaw to say when we actually have to do those works. So as long as we're following the language of this bylaw, which we would be in that instance, we would be fine. Yes, we would be paying interest on that money sitting, because we would have borrowed for it at whatever the interest rate is at that point in time. But as the mayor mentioned, we would most likely then, because we have that money in our bank account, we would probably move it into a investment vehicle, which would then generate interest revenue for us. What the net difference of those two interest amounts would be, I don't know at this point in time, but
that's
that's
really
what we would do.
Because I just, I don't know what the public would think if they knew we were borrowing money. Like, I see why we would. I see that it is, in one way it is good to have that money set aside so that we can do the project. But because we don't have an exact date for it, I just feel weird borrowing money that we then put in an account for a project that we don't exactly know how much it's going to cost or when it's going to happen. I'd rather borrow what we're going to use for the project that we're going to do. So that, to me, that's more clear to the public, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Traynor. Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was wondering, on this borrowing topic, how long our borrowing authorization is good for. I mean, I see no point in borrowing money until we need it. Can we borrow as the bills come in? And as you said, is it good for 2 or 3 years so that maybe next year when we figure out things for the system upstream part that we have the authorization, we don't borrow the money until we have the project engineering done and we're going for tenders? I mean, you're talking about borrowing the money and putting it in the bank and then spending it when later. I'm talking about don't have the authorization and don't borrow until you need the money. Is there a time limit on this when we take the funds? That's the first question for David.
So through the mayor to Councillor Barkwell, technically there is no, well, there is and there isn't a deadline. So I guess the hard deadline is the borrowing bylaw allows us to borrow monies and have it repaid over a 25-year term. So that's kind of our hard and fast. When it comes to the project, so if we were to, the bylaw says we can borrow up to $6.4 million. So if council decides, well, we don't want to do these upstream costs, we're only going to borrow the 4.4 million, the bylaw still allows us to borrow that additional $2 million. And that goes on for the 25-year period. So we can borrow that 2 million because we've gone through this AAP process, and if it passes, we will be allowed then to borrow that 2 million at any point in time up to that 25-year period. Now, the drawback on that is if we don't borrow that $2 million, it does go against our borrowing capacity limit because in theory, that's already been approved. So when we calculate any future borrowings, if we end up borrowing money for the recreation center, for instance, down the road, that 2 million that we haven't actually physically borrowed will still go against our limit because we do have the authority to borrow it. So I hope that answers your question, Councillor Barkwell.
Yes, to the extent that it doesn't help us with any kind of decision. It seems like we wouldn't borrow it and put it in the bank. It still looks like to me, because either way, you're going to be paying interest on it, and there's that interest rate differential. But I'm sure you'll figure out. It looks to me like it's a little bit more like a line of credit we can draw upon as we do this project, and you would never borrow more than you needed it before the bills came in. So I remember a conversation that I thought the Giant's Head project was going to be about 6 million or something, and the upstream was going to be 2 million. So just to, not to belabor a point, but so the upstream and the downstream works currently is estimated will be completed within the 6.4 million. Everything that has to do with the whole waterline twinning and the separation.
Through the mayor. So the 2 million is within that 6.46 million that we're borrowing. So if we were to remove that component, so the upstream didn't get done this year. The downstream that we've sort of spoken about is a totally additional project to this, so that's not part of it. What we'll be getting for this project is all of the all the infrastructure from Harris to Gartrell, which includes the paths, the water mains, system separation, and the paving, and then the paving from Gartrell to Hillborn. The lines will be there, but they'll just have treated water in them. So the only difference from what we discussed back in November is it won't be untreated water at this time, but it will in the future. So we'll still be getting all of that infrastructure. The $2 million offsite or upstream projects, those won't be completed at this time, but we won't be needing that $2 million for it either.
Okay, I understand that. I just was, I just thought that the total project, both separation and upstream and downstream, was going to be more than 6.5 million. So this is actually good news to me, because I was expecting a higher amount. I also wondered whether the 2 million for the upstream separation, being that it's strictly a separation aspect of it, whether there wouldn't be then the opportunity for grant funding in the the year or two that it's going to take to design and build that that part of things.
Through the mayor, yeah, we're always looking for grant funding for any of those projects or any of these system separation projects, because we do have several of them within the district moving forward. With regard to the total cost estimate, you were right about the initial $6 million, but that was for the entire project to be brand new water mains and the walking path from Gartrell through to Hillborn as well. If you recall, we did a bit of I think we called it option B in the November report, which reduced that down to just paving of that last stretch. But if we did put the water mains in there and the pathway, then we were up to that 6 million plus the 2 million, as you're referring to. So we did scale it back. Council scaled it back at that meeting.
Are you good with your questions then, Councillor Barkwell?
Thank you. Yes, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I just, this is a question for clarification. The project as it stands now, between Gartrell and Hillborn, we're doing the pulverized pavement there. The water mains will be installed as well though, right? Like it'll be separated there as well?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. It's already separated there.
It's already separated there.
Two very old water mains in that area. So the idea with this was we were going to utilize those very old, ones from the 30s, I think ones from the 70s, water mains in that area, do a couple of tie-ins to ensure that the services are correct, are attached to the correct water main, be it treated water or untreated water, and then just paving that stretch. So it will be system separated. It'll just be the old water mains that we're using. Whereas the rest of the project will have two brand new water mains, one for domestic, one for irrigation, for the extents of Giant's Head from Harris to Gartrell.
Okay, and then the replacement of the water mains, that'll be part of the 10-year master plan that you're working on?
Are you talking about the ones from Gartrell to
To
Hillborn?
Hillborn,
Yeah, we'll read.
because it'll be everywhere, so it'll include
Well,
that area too?
yeah, we'll look at all the different water mains in the area and
Yes.
figure out which ones at which time will be done. But at
Yes.
some point they will need to be replaced. They're definitely aging, and we do see ruptures in those pipes from time to time. So
Okay,
they'll be part of a larger master plan.
okay, thank you. Questions here? Yeah, just a sec. Are there any questions here? Okay. Martin, I'm going to go to you and then back to Councillor Trainer.
Good morning. I just quickly wanted to clarify, just based on what I hear in the discussion here. The upstream projects will likely not take place anytime soon. If you look at the projects as a hand, Giant's Head Road would be one of the fingers. And what someone at some point was trying to do is put a glove on, putting the palm on first and then the fingers. So right now, Giant's Head Road is one of the fingers and the upstream projects are the palm. So in order to, to do the upstream projects, we need to complete the other fingers. And those fingers are Hespeler Road, Front Bench Road, Harris Road, Happy Valley Road, Gartrell Road itself. And if we don't do those fingers, it's literally like putting a glove on palm first and then try to wrap it around the fingers. And it's just not going to work. And I just wanted to clarify that. Like I have no knowledge about the borrowing and all that stuff, but I just wanted to clarify that there's a lot of work that needs to be done before we would even consider doing any upstream works. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Trainer.
I'm just going to throw this idea out there. I've never really liked the fact that we're kind of doing a Band-Aid solution from Gartrell to Hillborn. I always, I know it's additional money, but I feel like we're already in that area and we're going to be putting, new surface on. And I just don't like the idea of leaving pipes from the 1930s underneath there. So I'm wondering what council thinks. I mean, I know we've already voted on this, but is it worthwhile to look at doing that section properly, like to the same extent that the other section's going to be done, and using that $2 million for that section? It's just an idea. I'm just throwing it out there.
Councillor Holmes and then Councillor Barkwell.
Well, in response to that, after listening to Martin, I would say there's even less urgency to do that stretch right now. So I just wanted to clarify what Martin was saying there. So we would need to do more twinning on like Harris and Hespeler before we do the upstream work to make it all, to make sense out of it all? Or do you do the upstream work and then you can, as Martin says, do all the fingers later?
Joe?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's why we're not proceeding with the upstream works right now, because there's more analysis we want to do to ensure that we're doing this in the right order and doing it as efficiently as we can. There are different options for how we get water to some of those areas of town. As an example, going around the opposite side of Giant's Head Mountain. So at this time, the recommendation is not to proceed with the upstream projects, and we'll review what the options are to efficiently get water to the Giant's Head stretch. So the $2 million, we really aren't looking to construct that this year. We really need to do a little bit more analysis to ensure that we're doing this the most efficient way possible, because there are some downstream projects that will need to happen in conjunction with the other projects.
Is that crystal clear now? Clear as mud. All right. Councillor Barkle.
Yeah, thank you. I kind of had a similar question as Councillor Holmes. Martin's comments kind of made me wonder whether this separation, which was, one of the benefits of the whole project that, was touted to everyone as reducing that load on the water treatment plant and preventing boil water advisories and such in these really peaks that we're going to get more and more of. Whether that's going to happen for $2 million or whether it's significantly more complicated and 2 million isn't going to be enough, or maybe we just simply don't know. Can Joe comment on that? Maybe we don't have an answer, but a comment would help.
Yeah, through the mayor. There are several projects. The system separation is a larger project. Obviously, as council knows, it began many, many years ago, and there's a lot of areas of town that we're looking to system separate. My understanding is this project, the Giants Head Road project, actually started out as let's pave Giants Head Road and get that paved. And I think it was brought up that while we're doing that, we should install these lines as part of the larger system separation project within the district. There are a number of other areas within the district that are maybe close to system separation in the short term, but right now, to get system separation to Giants Head doesn't make sense without a little bit more analysis and looking at the other areas of town that will benefit from system separation. So it's a larger project, and that's why the 10-year master plan will really help us in looking at how we can move towards the system separation for more areas of town, including like the 5 megaliters that will be a benefit from this project. Well, if we go down Hespeler and a few other areas, we're going to gain other efficiencies within the water treatment plant. So it's part of a larger plan. It's not just Giants Head was the next one on the list. It's more of a benefit of we're going to pave the road. While we're going to pave it, we may as well put these pipes in, even though they don't have system separation at this time. They will in the future.
Graham, I'll go to you and then back to Councillor Barkle.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to bring us a little bit full circle here. The main project, the main intent, the desired outcome is the Giants Head Road project. We've always known that raw water was not going to be available on day one, that the road was going to be built, that the lines were going to go in, and there was going to be some complexity with the upstream works, that we had some money approved by council to get an engineer who's with us today to look at those upstream works. And what we know now is those upstream works are a bit more involved. It's going to take a little more time to get that raw water to the Giants Head Road project. But the main project is a road project. We're twinning those lines, and what we know is the road's in bad shape. It needs rebuilt, and the lines that are in there are failing and antiquated and full of calcification and other challenges that are causing quality drinking water issues for some of the residents in that area. And so we've always known once we put those lines in, there would be there'd be treated drinking water in both of them until we solve this upstream. Nothing's changed there. That was in the original council reports and briefings. The point that we're making today, and that's why I just want to bring us a little bit full circle, that is the main project. Those upstream works are going to be a bit more involved, but we're already on it with this road and water master plan, and there may be other alternatives to get that raw water there that could be even more innovative than what we were originally thinking. So I just wanted to make sure that we also remember the main project that was originally approved by council is this Giants Head Road project with the water twinning there and those lines going in. That needs to be done, and it's not getting cheaper. Any day that goes by, the inflationary costs we're seeing, time value of money, it's necessary to move forward if that's still the desired outcome, to see these infrastructure improvements in that area. And as soon as we can do it, and it may be a little bit more time, but as soon as we can do it with that upstream and downstream planning, we will be connecting that raw water in there to see the full value of the project come to realization. So just wanted to kind of bring us full circle on the concept. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you for that, Graham. We should also remember that as of Wednesday, Bank of Canada interest rates have started to climb again. And although we get kind of a preferred rate borrowing this way, it still potentially will impact the cost of borrowing too. So let's get on this. Councillor Barkwell and then Councillor Van Elfen.
Yeah, I certainly agree with getting on with this ASAP. Rates are going up, costs are going up. I was just thinking, could it be said then that what you're suggesting is that, okay, for $2 million, we might get 5 million megaliters a day worth of water separation, but there might be some other projects where if we spend $2 million, we could get some other number, 10 or 8 megaliters worth of separation a day? Is this sort of where we're, what you're examining?
Yeah, through the mayor, we are examining that. The $2 million, if we were to do that right now, it wouldn't result in untreated water for Giants Head Road at this point. So we won't realize that 5 megaliters per day at this point. It's going to have to be in conjunction with several other projects below. So the area that was in red in the that one map that I put up there, there's a few projects in that area that would need to be done prior to that. So while the 5 megaliters will, once we do get untreated water to Giants Head, we will realize that 5 megaliters, but the $2 million for the upstream projects at this time, it's not really, that number doesn't, it's not correct. We know there's going to be additional projects that are needed in order to get that water to Giants Head. And we just want to optimize those projects so that we're doing them in the correct order, and we're doing them so that they're the most efficient. So we don't put in a water main, some sort of a water main today, and then realize, you know what, if we had done something over here, it would have been more ideal. So really, we just need to step back and look holistically at our system separation and figure out which projects go at which time. Having those pipes in Giants Head ready to go is an ideal solution. It won't be realized this year. It'll just be in future years.
Councillor Van Elfen.
As said earlier, clear as mud, I guess. But first of all, I don't like the idea of borrowing the full amount of money and putting $2 million into a bank account and collecting interest and charging the public on their taxes.
Governments have gotten.
So that's my first point. My second point is along the lines of what Councillor Traynor said. I'm more willing to borrow the full amount, do the Giants Head or Gartrell to Hillborn properly, putting the pipes in the ground, replacing the 1930s pipe and the 1970s pipe, repaving it to a proper standard, redoing the base properly, and then in the future, when we do the upstreams works, it's just another section of our community that's already good to go. Instead of having to worry about it, it's going to fail. We know that, and it's failing as the rest of our community is with old pipes. So if we have the opportunity, you get a contractor to come in and bid on one section of road, they can bid on the whole project, and it'd probably be more cost efficient in the long run. But that's my opinion. I think if we're going to do the project, we're not going to get the benefit of the twinning immediately, but in the future, when we do turn that switch, that whole section's ready to go also. So I don't know if it's a benefit to do it properly all at once with the 6.4. And then in the future, we look at funding to do those upstream works. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that's an option. When you go out for tender, can you ask to bid on 2 projects? One, what we've passed, and one what Marty was just talking about, and if it fits into that approved budget 6.4, can we use that money, the full borrowing money for that, rather than the upstream portion for the rest of the road?
Before you answer that, Joe, I'm just going to step in and exercise my right as the chair. We're getting ahead of ourselves here. We need to decide today about the loan authorization. It needs to go to the paper today in order to meet all of the subsequent timelines. I think to talk about what ifs and can we do's right now, it's not on the table just now. We're talking about this project as it stands today, and this is what council approved before. And if we want to take a step back and do that, then we need to understand the ramifications of doing that. So the question before us right now is the loan authorization for the Giants Head Road upgrades, as council has approved them to this point. Whether we want to go to the 6.4 million, that's a question that we need to answer, because if we're not going to the 6.4, then it puts another complication in this. Well, I should say a delay probably, because we'll have to go back to the province yet again, delaying the process. I'm going to go to Graham and yeah, please go ahead, Graham, and then back to you, Councillor Van Alphen.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to be clear, it's not a question we're asking. So our recommendation is the ceiling is that 6.4. That hasn't changed. The wording is quite broad in terms of those upstream works. And certainly the money could be used to support that work and the time comes and we understand it better. There's a long-term borrowing sequence here. Councillor Barkwill's example was bang on in terms of almost an approved line of credit. And so it wouldn't be our recommendation that we change that number. That will impact our timeline. The other thing that will impact our timeline is if we start to revisit what the original option was and going to Hillborn, because in all likelihood, we'd have to go back to the province, talk about the wording, make sure we're in good stead on that. If it's the desire of council, that will incorporate delay. Now, that being said, as things move forward, as time goes on, as we learn more, as we look at what the tie-in options to Hillborn and et cetera, could other money be used for that? Or could we get a subsequent decision of the province that says, actually, in our opinion, and things good, we probably could look at those other considerations. But if we decide to try to do that now, we're going to have to go back through the spin cycle a little bit with the province and the wording and look at our AAP and the bylaw and go right back a little bit to sort of square one. So I just want to throw a cautionary flag up there.
Thank you, Graham. And I might remind council that there was a request to revisit our decision before, and that was denied by council. So, we need to make a decision on this. Councillor Van Alphen.
No, thank you, Madam Mayor, and I appreciate what our CEO says and what you were just saying also. But we're asked to make a decision here today on the borrowing on the 11th hour with new information. Basically, that the timeline to do the upstream work is way more intense or involved than we thought, right? So we could be years down the road before we do the upstream works. I don't think that was ever really indicated to council prior than to today. So like I say, we're at the 11th hour. We got to go to publication today for the borrowing, and there's a lot of new information. That's the only thing I am saying. Thank you.
Okay, we disagree on that, but that's all right. That's her prerogative. Councillor Barkle.
I appreciate what Councillor Van Elfen says. That's he's correct, but the new information doesn't change my feelings that we should press on here. It's going to result, I understand, in some sort of delay and perhaps a better overall plan in the end. I guess it counts. Yeah, I just, now that we made the decision, I just want to get on with it. And I don't know if we're talking about this or not, but I certainly haven't changed my mind about that last stretch to Hillborn, because there's, I don't know, half a dozen connections there, and it's just like a lot of road for a small number of connections. So nothing's changed for me because of this delay, I guess. Although it is new information, I appreciate that, Councillor Elfin, Ben Elfin.
Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, likewise, I have no interest in repealing this bylaw and starting all over again or anything like that. Let's just carry on.
So I don't see a resolution associated with this. This is just providing direction. Should we have a straw poll, or it is a recommendation of staff, and so I'm not sure how we should proceed. Graham or Kendra?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So we have all the decisions already from previous council decisions that we need to do everything we need to do. This is an information meeting for council today. Council's not receiving 11th hour request for decision, and I apologize if it appears that way. We just are of the opinion when we know something, it's important that council knows something. And the original reports and briefings to council did indicate the upstream works were unknown, and that it would take time to get the raw water to these twinned lines. And we knew it would not be ready the same time the project is done. None of that's changed. But we do know now it's going to be a bit more involved, and it's going to be a bit more expensive on the upstream works, and it's going to take a bit more time. And that's the piece we wanted council to be aware of. But nothing is changed in terms of what we need from council, the decisions of council that have been made, and the approval to go forward on the main project, which has always been what's been in focus, it remains. So we don't need anything from council today in terms of that. It was an information element to make sure council understands that raw water that we knew would take time is taking more time to get to those lines, but the lines will be ready to go. The road will be repaired, and we'll be able to see this project move forward, which is a really important project for the community for all the same reasons that council originally intended.
Thank you, Graham. I just have one question, and I had asked this earlier. I'm going to rephrase it though, because I'm not sure if this is I'm not sure if this is typical of the wording. Sorry, take my mask off. In the loan authorization, this is the one that will be going into the paper. This is the first of the public notices. Is it common maybe, or is it allowed even, to put in an indication of what this will potentially mean to the taxpayers in terms of property tax increase?
So thank you, Madam Mayor. So we can include that. It's a large notice and it's very legislative. So I do have a section that will say it is estimated that the borrowing will result in a 4.77 water rate increase and a 2.05 property tax increase, and then the costs associated with each for the project. And then that wording's also on the website. It didn't go in the newsletter. It's on our info sheets that will go out and be handed out. And then we're still looking at other ways to communicate with the public.
Okay, thank you. Not that people read the public notices, but any opportunity that we have to make sure that we're not getting that nasty response is appreciated. Thank you. Councillor Barkwell, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick comment. Maybe I'm a dreamer or something, but since water separation and safe water is a real priority with senior levels of government, maybe having an identified amount for the separation will increase the chances of getting a government grant for that portion of it. Just trying to be optimistic here.
That's a good thought, Councillor Barkwell. I see Graham nodding his head as well, so. Okay, so are we all okay with this, with the little bit of extra text that our corporate officer is going to include? Yes? Doesn't matter either way? Councillor Holmes?
Yeah, the only thing about putting in the percentage of tax increase, we don't know yet how much we're going to be borrowing, so we don't really know how much the tax increase will be. So if you're going to do that, you'd have to say up to, I guess. I mean, it's because we don't know.
Well, I think we do know how much we're going to be borrowing, but Kendra, I'll have you respond to that.
So thank you, Madam Mayor, or through the chair to Councillor Holmes. So the way the notice and even the bylaw and how it's being presented to council is that we're going to borrow an amount not to exceed the 6 million. So the tax increases are for that full amount. I think it might get a bit confusing if we start putting in there, well, we might not use this much, and if we use this much, your tax increase would be this way. So we have that it's an estimated that the borrowing will result in this amount of an increase in your property taxes and water rate, but those are calculated to the 6.465.
So we do know the amount that we're borrowing. It's just not to exceed that amount.
But we don't. We might only borrow 4.5 million. Correct?
So like we could remove what it will result in for the property tax. We could remove that tax increases, but we have to put in the actual notice the amount that we're borrowing. So I could remove it's an estimated the borrowing will result in a 4.77 water rate increase. I could remove that language.
Would you prefer that to come out, Councillor Holmes?
It doesn't really matter to me that much. I just think that it could, if we're telling people you're going to pay another 4.whatever% tax, and it's not, I guess they'll be happy that it won't be that much, but in the end, it's not entirely accurate. That's all. But I'm not. It's not. I'm easy either way.
Councillor Van Elfen, did you have your hand up? No. Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Couldn't we just say, add a line at the end, if the full amount is not borrowed, I have a hard time saying that word, then the tax rate will not be as much, something like that. Yeah, just kind of stating the obvious in a way, but also including the fact that there's a possibility that the full amount won't be borrowed. One way or the other, I'm not hung up on it.
Dave?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, if council wants to remove the percentages, from my perspective, we don't know what our new construction is going to be next year and how that's going to affect the actual overall percentage and all those types of things. So from my perspective, as the finance officer, I would, sure, we can remove those quite easily. The one item that I would not remove though, Madam Mayor, is the the calculated amount that the $73.15, I believe it is, letting residents know that that is the potential maximum that they could be paying for this project. I feel that is probably the most crucial number on that entire notice. And residents will absolutely want to know that. They won't really care, I think, how that reflects from a percentage increase per se, but they will want to know what that dollar value is, Madam Mayor.
Could I ask, with that dollar value, is that both the water rate increase and the property tax?
Yes, Madam Mayor, that's the combined total.
That, I think that's a brilliant way of looking at this. And again, you know, throw that word estimated in there based on what we are looking at potentially borrowing. Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think we could add a turbo to that brilliance by also adding the sentence Councillor Barkwell indicated, which could be less if. I think that's really helpful because that's also very true. It's very true that we might not hit that borrowing ceiling. So.
Okay. And I again, I'd like to see that. I don't want to see that number change because we're going to be, as far as the province goes, as we heard from David, that's added to our debt borrowing anyways, whether we use that or not. So, because that's what's been approved by the province. So, I'm absolutely fine with those adjustments. And again, if we can be as transparent as possible so that people really know what that means, and the relatively small impact, annual impact of that. I guess maybe that should have the word annual in it too, so people don't think it's a one-off thing. Then I think that's a good way to go. Okay. Can I just get nods or nays? Yeah, yeah, good. Councillor Traynor?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Can I stop nodding now?
Oh, yes, you look like a bobblehead. Great. Thank you for your time this morning, everyone. It went a little bit longer than we anticipated, but that's all right. Call for adjournment of the meeting. Councillors Van Elfen and Holmes, all in favor? Great, thank you.